My name is Mia, and the day my life finally broke open didn't look dramatic from the outside. No thunder, no shattered glass, no cinematic ending. Just a knock on the door, and a man I used to call my husband standing there like he still owned the air I breathed. The divorce had been finalized 3 months earlier. 3 quiet, fragile months where I was slowly learning how to exist without being watched, corrected, or diminished. I had just started to feel something unfamiliar, peace, when he showed up again. Ethan never knocked gently. He pounded, like the door itself had wronged him. When I opened it, he didn't wait for an invitation. He leaned against the frame, eyes red, jaw tight, the sharp scent of alcohol cutting through the hallway. "You think this is over?" he said. I didn't step back. That alone felt like a victory. "It is," I answered. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You really believe that? After everything? After all those years, you just walk away and pretend you're someone new?" I kept my voice steady, even though my fingers were curling into my palm. "I'm not pretending. I'm finally being honest." That made his expression darken. "You," he scoffed. "Honest? That's rich. You've been lying your entire life." That was his favorite weapon, turning reality inside out until I doubted my own memories. He'd done it for decades, slowly, carefully, until I stopped trusting myself. But something had changed. "Leave," I said. He stepped closer instead. "What about your son?" he snapped. "You think he won't find out? You think he won't learn who you really are?" My chest tightened at the mention of Daniel. My son. The one person I had tried to protect, even when I didn't know how. "He's an adult," I said. "He makes his own choices." "Does he?" Ethan's voice dropped, quieter now, more dangerous. "Not when his mother hides the truth. Not when she pretends his real father never existed." That hit harder than I expected, because there was truth in it. Not the way he meant it, but truth all the same. "Don't," I said softly. "Oh, I will," he continued. "I'll tell him everything. Why you married me. Why you walked away from the other man. How you chose security over love." My throat went dry. For years, he had used that part of my past like a blade, pressing it exactly where it hurt most. And for years, I had let him. But not anymore. "Is that a threat?" I asked. He smiled, slow and cold. "It's a promise." Silence settled between us, thick and heavy. I could hear a door opening somewhere down the hall. Someone watching. That tiny awareness gave me strength. "You don't control me anymore," I said. "I never lost control," he replied instantly. "You're still the same, Mia. Weak. Afraid. You'll run back to what's safe. You always do." That word, safe. For so long, I had convinced myself that was enough. That stability was worth more than love. That fear was just part of being an adult. But standing there, looking at him, I realized something that felt almost shocking in its clarity. I had never been safe. Not once. "Get out," I said. He blinked. "What?" "Get out of my life. And don't come back." For a second, I thought he might laugh again. Instead, his face hardened. "You'll regret this," he said. "When you're alone. When no one wants you. When your son turns his back on you." I felt the old fear stir, but it didn't take over. Because something else rose up with it. Anger. Real, steady anger. "I already regret something," I said quietly. He smirked. "Finally." "What?" "Choosing you." The words landed between us like a crack in glass. He stared at me, stunned. In all our years together, I had never said anything like that. I had never fought back. "You don't mean that," he muttered. "Ego." "You're just upset." "I'm done." His hand twitched, like he wanted to grab me, to shake me back into the version of myself he understood. But he didn't. Maybe it was the neighbors still watching. Maybe it was the fact that something in my eyes had changed. Fine, he said. Go ahead. Try to start over. Try to find someone. You won't. I didn't answer, because deep inside, something unexpected had surfaced. A memory, not painful, not bitter, warm. A different voice, a different man. Someone who had looked at me like I mattered, not like I needed to be shaped or corrected. I hadn't let myself think about him in years. But now the memory was there, clear as ever. And for the first time, I didn't push it away. You're afraid, I said. Ethan frowned. Of what? Of being nothing without someone to control. His expression twisted with anger. You have no idea what you're talking about. Maybe not, I said. But I'm starting to figure it out. I stepped back and closed the door before he could respond. Locked it. Stood there with my back against it, breathing hard, waiting. His footsteps lingered in the hallway for a moment, then faded. The silence that followed felt different. Not empty. Open. For years, silence had meant tension. Waiting for the next argument, the next criticism, the next shift in mood. But this silence belonged to me. I slid down to the floor and sat there, staring at nothing. My heart was still racing, but it wasn't just fear. It was something I hadn't felt in a very long time. Possibility. 3 days later, it hit me without warning. I woke up gasping for air. My chest felt tight, like something was crushing it from the inside. My hands trembled as I tried to sit up, convinced something was terribly wrong. I reached for my phone, ready to call for help. And then, just as suddenly, it stopped. The pressure eased. My breathing returned. I sat there, confused, shaken. It happened again later that morning, and again in the afternoon. By evening, I knew I couldn't ignore it. But deep down, I had a feeling this wasn't just physical. It was something else. Something that had been buried for years, finally finding a way out. The next morning, I told myself I was fine, that what had happened the night before, and the strange episodes after, were just stress, just my body reacting to everything I had been through. But the truth was harder to ignore than I expected. By noon, I had another attack, stronger this time, catching me off guard while I was standing in my kitchen, staring at nothing, my coffee going cold in my hands. My chest tightened, so suddenly I dropped the mug, and it shattered across the floor, the sound echoing far louder than it should have in the quiet apartment. I grabbed the counter, trying to steady myself, convinced for a moment that this was it, that something inside me was finally giving out after years of holding everything together. But just like before, it passed. Slowly, painfully, leaving me shaken and exhausted, like I had run miles without moving an inch. That was when I called the doctor. Her name was Dr. Alvarez, and she had been my physician for years. She had never said anything directly about my marriage, never crossed that professional line, but she had always looked at me like she saw more than I was willing to admit. When I described what had been happening, she didn't sound surprised, concerned, yes, but not surprised. Come in today, she said. I want to see you. Sitting in her office a few hours later, I felt strangely exposed. Not physically, but emotionally, like the walls I had built over decades were suddenly transparent. She listened carefully as I explained everything, the divorce, Ethan showing up, the confrontation, the threats, the panic attacks. I expected her to focus on my heart, my lungs, something physical. Instead, she leaned back slightly and said something that caught me completely off guard. Mia, what you're describing sounds like panic attacks.
I blink så her.
That doesn't make sense. I'm not. I've never been that kind of person. What kind of person? She asked gently. The kind who loses control, I said. I've always handled things. She gave me a small, knowing look. Have you? Or have you endured them? That question settled heavily in the space between us. I didn't answer right away because I didn't know how to. For most of my life, I had believed those two things were the same. These attacks, she continued, they're not weakness. They're your nervous system reacting to something it hasn't been allowed to process before. You've been in a prolonged state of stress for years. Now that the situation has changed, your body is finally trying to catch up. But the divorce was months ago, I said. Shouldn't I be better by now? Healing doesn't follow a schedule, she replied. Sometimes it begins when you finally feel safe enough for it to start. Safe. That word again. It sounded different coming from her. Not like a justification. Not like an excuse. But like something real. Something I had never actually experienced, even though I had spent years convincing myself I had. I stared down at my hands. I don't feel safe, I admitted. I feel lost. That's normal, she said. You've spent a long time shaping your life around someone else's expectations. Now you're being asked, by life, by yourself, to figure out who you are without that. Her words stirred something uncomfortable inside me. Not fear exactly. More like emptiness. I don't know who that is, I said quietly. She didn't rush to respond. She let the silence sit, like it mattered. Then maybe that's where you start, she said. Not with answers. With questions. I let out a small, humorless laugh. I wouldn't even know what to ask. She tilted her head slightly. When was the last time you made a decision just because you wanted to? The question seemed simple, but the more I thought about it, the more impossible it felt to answer. I searched my memory, recent years, then further back, then even further. Every choice I could recall had been shaped by something else. Avoiding conflict, keeping peace, meeting expectations, minimizing risk, not wanting, just adjusting. I don't know, I finally said. A long time ago. How long? She pressed gently. I hesitated. Then the number came to me, and it made my chest tighten again, not from panic this time, but from realization. Over 30 years, I whispered. She nodded slowly, as if that confirmed something she already understood. And before that, she asked. Before that. The words unlocked something I hadn't touched in years. A memory surfaced, clear and vivid, like it had been waiting just beneath the surface all along. A different version of me. Younger, lighter, uncertain, but hopeful. And him. I hadn't said his name out loud in decades. I knew someone, I said carefully. Dr. Alvarez didn't interrupt. It was before Ethan, I continued. Before everything became what it was. He was different. He listened. He didn't try to change me. He didn't make me feel like I had to earn my place in his life. I swallowed, surprised by how easily the memories were returning now. He used to talk about the future like it was something we were building together, I said. Not something I had to fit into. What happened? She asked. I looked away. My family, I said. They didn't trust him. Said he was unstable. That he had plans, but no guarantees. They told me I needed something secure. Something real. And you believed them. I was scared, I admitted. I had a child to think about. I didn't want to make a mistake. And so you chose what felt safer. Yes. The word tasted bitter now. Did it feel right? She asked. I didn't even have to think about it.
No.
The room was quiet again, but this time it felt different. Heavier. More honest. I told myself it was the responsible choice. I continued. That love wasn't enough. That stability mattered more. And for a while, I convinced myself I was right. And now, I exhaled slowly. Now I think I was just afraid to believe I deserved something better. Dr. Alvarez's expression softened. That's a powerful realization. It doesn't change anything, I said quickly. That was a lifetime ago. Maybe, she said. Or maybe it's something that still matters more than you think.
I didn't respond to that.
I couldn't, because part of me already knew she was right. After the appointment, I sat in my car for a long time without starting the engine. The world outside moved normally, people walking, cars passing, life continuing as if nothing had shifted. But inside me something had. Not fully, not completely, but enough. That night, I did something I hadn't done in over 3 decades. I went into my closet. At the very top shelf, hidden behind boxes and old coats, there was something I had carried with me through every move, every stage of my life. A small worn box. I pulled it down carefully, my hands trembling slightly as I set it on the bed. For a moment, I just looked at it, unsure if I was ready. Then I opened it. Inside were pieces of a life I had tried to forget. Photographs, letters, small, insignificant objects that somehow held entire worlds within them. I picked up a photo first. 3 people.
Me.
Him. And my son, still small enough to be held, laughing at something just outside the frame. We looked happy. Not perfect. Not polished.
Real.
I traced the edge of the photo with my finger, my chest tightening again, but not from panic. From something deeper. Regret. And something else.
Hope.
For the first time in years, I allowed myself to ask a question I had avoided at all costs. What if I had been wrong? What if the life I walked away from wasn't something that was meant to be left behind? And more dangerously, what if it wasn't too late? That night, I didn't sleep. Not even for a minute. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the box still open beside me, its contents spilling pieces of my past into a present I could no longer ignore. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his face, not exactly as it had been, but as my memory insisted on keeping it. Softer than reality, maybe.
Kinda.
But still him. Still the only person who had ever made me feel like I didn't need to shrink to be loved. I turned onto my side, then onto my back again, pulling the blanket tighter around me as if that could quiet the storm building inside my chest. It wasn't panic this time. It was something far more unsettling: clarity. By morning, I had convinced myself that reopening the past was a mistake, that nostalgia was dangerous, that memory had a way of rewriting truth into something more beautiful than it had actually been. I told myself I was being emotional, that I was reacting to the stress of the divorce, to Ethan's threats, to the sudden emptiness of my life. I told myself I needed to move forward, not backward. And yet, as I stood in my kitchen making coffee, I found myself staring at my phone, my mind circling one thought over and over again. Where is he now? I didn't even realize I had said it out loud until I heard my own voice echo faintly in the quiet room. It felt absurd. 30 years. People don't just reappear after 30 years like nothing happened. Lives move on.
People change.
He had probably built a completely different life, one that had nothing to do with me anymore. Maybe he was married. Maybe he had children. Maybe he had forgotten me entirely. That last thought hurt more than I expected. I shook my head, trying to push it away, but it lingered. Because if I was honest with myself, I had never forgotten him.
Not really.
I had buried the memories, hidden them, convinced myself they didn't matter. But forgetting was something else entirely. By noon, I gave up pretending. I needed to know. I told myself it was just curiosity, just closure, just a way to finally put that chapter of my life to rest properly. But deep down, I knew that wasn't entirely true. I sat at my small dining table with my laptop open, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. For a long moment, I couldn't type. It felt like crossing a line I couldn't uncross, like opening a door that might not lead anywhere, or worse, might lead somewhere I wasn't ready to go. But eventually I took a breath and typed his name. The screen filled with results almost instantly. And there he was. Older, of course. Time had left its mark in ways I could see even in a photograph. His hair was streaked with gray now, his face more defined, more serious. But his eyes, they were the same.
Steady.
Thoughtful. Familiar in a way that made my chest ache. I clicked on one of the links, my heart pounding harder with every second.
He had built something.
Not just a job. Not just a career. A company. A successful one, from what I could tell. Articles, interviews, mentions of major projects. His name carried weight now, the kind of quiet authority that comes from years of work and persistence. I leaned back in my chair, stunned. He had done it. Everything he used to talk about, every plan, every dream, I had thought they were uncertain, fragile, too risky to trust. And yet here it was, laid out in undeniable reality. He hadn't been dreaming. He had been building. And I had walked away from it. A sharp wave of regret hit me so suddenly, I had to close my eyes. For years, I had told myself I made the right choice. That I chose stability, security, a better future for my child. But looking at the life he had created, I couldn't hold on to that belief anymore. I hadn't chosen better. I had chosen fear. I sat there for a long time scrolling through articles, interviews, photos from events. He looked confident, grounded, like someone who knew exactly who he was. And then I saw something that made my breath catch. The name of the company. It sounded familiar in a way I couldn't immediately place. I frowned, trying to connect it to something in my current life. And then it hit me. Ethan. My stomach dropped. I sat up straight, staring at the screen. No, that couldn't be right. But the more I thought about it, the more the pieces started to align. Ethan had always talked about his company with pride. The same name, the same location, the same field. My heart started racing again, but not from panic. From something else entirely. There was no way unless they worked in the same place. The idea felt almost surreal. For a moment, I just sat there, trying to process it. 30 years of separation. Completely different paths. And somehow, their lives had intersected without me even knowing. Did Ethan know? The question came fast and sharp. Had he known all along? Had he recognized the name, the connection? Or had this been nothing more than an incredible coincidence? I didn't have the answers. But suddenly, everything felt closer. Too close. I stood up and started pacing the room, my thoughts spinning faster with every step. Part of me wanted to shut the laptop, to pretend I had never seen any of this, to go back to the fragile, controlled version of reality I had been living in. But that version was already gone. I had opened the door, and now I couldn't ignore what was on the other side. That afternoon, I left my apartment without fully deciding where I was going. I told myself I just needed air, space to think. But my feet carried me in a direction that felt less like a choice and more like instinct. Before I knew it, I was standing across the street from a tall glass building. The company. His company. My heart pounded as I looked up at it, sunlight reflecting off the windows in a way that made it almost impossible to see inside. People moved in and out of the entrance, their lives continuing normally, unaware of the storm raging inside me. What am I doing here? The question felt almost laughable because the answer was obvious. I wanted to see him, even if just for a second, even if he didn't see me, even if it changed nothing. I stepped into a nearby cafe instead, choosing a table by the window where I had a clear view of the entrance. My hands wrapped around a cup of coffee I didn't remember ordering, my eyes fixed on the building like I was afraid it might disappear if I looked away. Minutes passed, then an hour. I told myself I would leave soon, that this was ridiculous, that I had no right to insert myself into his life after all this time. And then, the door opened, and he walked out. Everything inside me went completely still. It was him. Not a memory. Not a photograph. Real. He paused just outside the building, looking around briefly, as if searching for something or someone. My breath caught as his gaze moved across the street, scanning the cafe windows. And then, his eyes met mine. Time collapsed. 30 years disappeared in an instant, leaving only the space between us and the weight of everything that had never been said. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't look away. For a second, I wasn't sure if he recognized me, if I was just another stranger sitting by a window.
But then I saw it.
That shift in his expression. Recognition.
Shock.
Something deeper, harder to name. He took a step forward, then another, and suddenly he was crossing the street. My heart pounded so loudly, I was sure everyone around me could hear it. Every instinct told me to run, to hide, to escape before this moment became real. But I stayed. I stayed as the cafe door opened,
As he walked inside.
as he stopped in front of my table. For a moment, neither of us spoke. We just looked at each other, taking in the years, the changes, the reality of what was happening. And then he said my name.
Mia.
Softly, like it still belonged to him. For a moment, I forgot how to speak. Hearing my name in his voice after so many years did something to me that I wasn't prepared for. It wasn't just memory, it was recognition, like a part of me I had buried had suddenly been called back to life. I sat there frozen, my hands wrapped tightly around the coffee cup, afraid that if I moved even slightly, the moment would shatter and disappear. Mia, he said again, quieter this time, as if he wasn't entirely sure I was real either. I swallowed, forcing myself to breathe.
Eat.
It sounded small, inadequate. 30 years reduced to a single, fragile word. He let out a breath that almost sounded like a laugh, though there was no humor in it. More disbelief than anything else. I wasn't sure it was you, he admitted, but I hoped. His voice trailed off, and for a second we just stood there, suspended in something that felt far too big for the space we were in. People moved around us, cups clinked, quiet conversations continued, but none of it felt real. The only thing that existed was him, standing in front of me, and the weight of everything we had lost.
Can I sit? He asked.
I nodded quickly.
Yes.
Of course. He pulled out the chair across from me and sat down, still watching me like he was afraid I might disappear if he looked away for too long. Up close, I could see the details time had added. The lines at the corners of his eyes, the faint silver in his hair, but none of it took anything away from who he was. If anything, it made him feel more solid, more real. You look, he started, then paused, searching for the right word. The same. I couldn't help it, I laughed softly. That's not true. It is, he said gently. Not exactly the same, but you still feel like you.
Something in my chest tightened at that.
You don't, I replied before I could stop myself. He raised an eyebrow slightly. That bad? No, I said quickly. I mean, you've changed, but in a good way. You look like you became who you were supposed to be. For a moment, he didn't respond. He just held my gaze, and I saw something flicker there, something deeper than simple conversation. I tried, he said finally. Silence settled again, but it wasn't as uncomfortable as I expected. It was heavy, yes, but also familiar. Like we were picking up a conversation that had only been paused, not ended. I didn't expect to see you here, he said after a moment. I didn't expect to come here, I admitted. That earned a small smile from him. So why did you? The question hung in the air, simple but impossible to answer honestly without opening everything. I was curious, I said carefully. About the company? He asked.
About you.
He leaned back slightly, studying me in a way that made it clear he understood there was more behind that answer. That's fair, he said. I've been curious about you too. I looked down at my hands. For 30 years? Every day, he said. The words hit me harder than I expected. I looked up sharply, searching his face to see if he was exaggerating, if this was just something people said in moments like this. But there was no hesitation in his expression. No doubt. You're serious, I said quietly. I am. My throat tightened. I thought about you all the time, he continued. Not in a way that stopped me from living my life, but in a way that never really went away. You were important, Mia. You don't just forget something like that. Something like that. That was one way to describe it. I didn't forget either, I admitted. He nodded slowly, like he had expected that. Why did you come today? He asked again, more gently this time. I hesitated. There was no easy way to say it. I found you online, I said. I saw what you built, and then I realized you work here. His expression shifted slightly. You didn't know before?
No.
And Ethan, he asked carefully. My chest tightened at the name. He works here too. I know. That caught me off guard. You know, I've known for a few years, he said. He never knew about me, not really, but I recognized the name when he joined the company. I stared at him, trying to process that. You've been in the same place this whole time? I asked. Not the whole time, he said, but long enough. And you never reached out, he finished for me. I nodded. He exhaled slowly. I didn't think I had the right. You made your choice. I respected that. The words were calm, but I could hear what was underneath them.
Pain.
I made the wrong choice, I said before I could stop myself. The moment the words left my mouth, I felt exposed, like I had just revealed something I couldn't take back. He didn't react immediately. He just watched me carefully. You believed it was the right one at the time, he said. No, I said, shaking my head. I believed it was the safer one. There's a difference. That seemed to land with him. I was scared, I continued. I had responsibilities, pressure from my family, everyone telling me what I should do, what made sense, what was practical. And I listened. And you don't think that was reasonable? He asked. Maybe it was, I said. But it wasn't honest. Silence again. But this time, it felt like something was shifting between us. I built everything I said I would, he said after a moment. Not because I needed to prove anything, but because I couldn't stop. It became part of me. I saw, I said softly. You did more than I ever imagined. He smiled faintly. You never believed I would. I flinched slightly. That's not fair. Isn't it? He asked, but his tone wasn't harsh, just honest. I wanted to believe, I said. I just didn't know how to trust something that felt uncertain. And what you chose instead? He asked. I let out a quiet breath. Was certain, just not in the way I thought. He studied me for a long moment, then nodded slowly, like he understood more than I was saying. Are you happy now? He asked. The question caught me off guard. I opened my mouth to answer, then stopped.
Was I?
For the first time in years, I had space. Freedom. The ability to make my own choices. But happiness that felt more complicated. I'm starting over, I said finally. He didn't push for more. That's something, he said. It is, I agreed. Another pause. But this one felt different. Lighter. Can I ask you something? He said. Anything. Why today? He asked again. After all this time, why now? I looked at him, really looked at him, and realized there was no point in pretending anymore. Because I couldn't stop wondering what my life would have been like if I had stayed, I said. The honesty of it hung between us, raw and unfiltered. And, he asked quietly. I swallowed. And I realized I don't want to spend the rest of my life wondering. His expression softened in a way I hadn't seen before. Mia, he said, and this time my name sounded different. not like a memory, like a possibility. After he said my name like that, soft, careful, but full of something unmistakably real, I felt the ground shift beneath everything I thought I understood about my life. It wasn't dramatic on the outside. No one in the cafe noticed anything unusual, but inside me, something irreversible had begun. For years, I had lived in a world where every decision was measured, filtered, controlled by fear or expectation. And now, sitting across from the one person who had once offered me something completely different, I realized I was being given a choice again. Not the same choice. Not the same circumstances. But something just as important. I don't know what to do with that, I admitted quietly, meeting his eyes. With what? He asked. This moment. The fact that you're here, that I'm here, that somehow after everything, we're sitting across from each other like no time has passed, and all of it has at the same time. He nodded slowly, as if he had already been thinking the same thing. I don't think there's a right way to handle it, he said. I think there's just honesty. I let out a small breath. Honesty is new for me. I don't believe that, he said gently. I think it's just something you haven't been allowed to use. That hit closer than I expected. For so long, honesty had felt dangerous, like saying the wrong thing could cost me stability, security, even peace. So I learned to adjust, to soften my truth, to reshape it into something more acceptable. Sitting here now, I realized how much that had cost me. I was afraid of making mistakes, I said. So, I chose what seemed safest. But it turns out that was the biggest mistake of all. He leaned forward slightly, his expression steady. You made a decision with the information and the pressure you had at the time. That's not failure. That's being human. Maybe, I said. But it still changed everything. Yes, he agreed. It did. We both fell quiet after that, but it wasn't the kind of silence that needed to be filled. It was the kind that carried meaning on its own. 30 years of separate lives, different paths, different versions of ourselves, all of it sitting there between us, not as a barrier, but as something that needed to be understood. I need to tell you something, he said after a moment. My chest tightened slightly. Okay. Yesterday, after everything that happened with the police, he continued, the situation at the office escalated. I frowned. With Ethan? He nodded. The incident didn't go unnoticed. It raised concerns, especially with upper management. What kind of concerns? I asked, though I had a feeling I already knew. Professional conduct, he said. Client relationships. Internal complaints. Things that had been building for a while. I stared at him, trying to process what he was saying. You mean this isn't just about me? No, he said calmly. It's not. His behavior has been an issue for some time. What happened yesterday just made it impossible to ignore. A strange mix of emotions stirred inside me. Part of me felt vindicated, like something I had endured for years was finally being seen clearly. But another part of me felt something else. Not sympathy exactly, but a kind of heavy awareness. This is going to affect him, isn't it? I said. Yes, he replied simply. I looked down at the table, tracing the edge of my cup with my finger. For so long, I had been conditioned to feel responsible for his reactions, his emotions, his consequences. If something went wrong, it was somehow my fault. If he was unhappy, I had failed in some way. And now I was being faced with the result of his own actions, separate from me. You're not responsible for this, he said, as if he could read my thoughts. I know, I said, though it still felt strange to say it out loud. Do you? He asked gently. I hesitated. Then I nodded. I'm learning. He gave a small, approving smile. That's enough. We sat there a little longer, talking about smaller things at first, safe things. His work, the city, how much had changed, and how much hadn't. But even in those lighter moments, There was something deeper running beneath the surface. Every glance, every pause, every quiet moment felt charged with everything we weren't saying. Eventually, he checked the time and sighed softly. I should get back, he said. There's a meeting I can't avoid. Of course, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Neither of us stood up right away. It felt like leaving would mean something final. Not an ending, but a shift. I'm glad you came today, he said. Me too, I replied. He hesitated for a second, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a card, sliding it across the table toward me. My number, he said, in case you want to talk again. I looked down at it, then back at him.
Ido.
Something softened in his expression at that. Good, he said. We stood up together, and for a brief moment, neither of us seemed to know what to do next. Hug, shake hands, walk away. In the end, he reached out and gently touched my arm. Not possessive, not hesitant, just present. I'll see you soon, Mia, he said. And then he left. I stood there for a few seconds after he walked out, my heart still racing, my mind struggling to catch up with everything that had just happened. It felt unreal, like I had stepped into a version of my life that wasn't supposed to exist. But it was real, and I couldn't ignore it anymore. That evening, I sat on my couch staring at his card, turning it over in my hands again and again. A simple piece of paper, a phone number, nothing extraordinary, and yet it felt like the most important thing I had held in years. I thought about calling him immediately. Then I told myself that would be too much, too fast. Then I thought about waiting, giving it time, letting things settle. But every time I tried to distract myself, my mind drifted back to him.
To the way he looked at me.
To the way he said my name. To the life I had walked away from. And the possibility that it wasn't completely gone. Around 9 in the evening, my phone rang. The number was unfamiliar. My stomach tightened instantly. I already knew who it was. I answered anyway.
Mia.
His voice. Different from earlier, tenser, sharper. What do you want? I asked. Ethan let out a short, bitter laugh. I think we both know the answer to that. I told you not to contact me. And I told you this wasn't over, he snapped. Did you really think you could just walk into my workplace, cause a scene, and then pretend everything is fine? I didn't cause anything, I said firmly. You did. That's not how it looks, he replied. People are talking. My reputation. Your actions are your responsibility. I cut in. Not mine. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then his tone changed. Lower. More dangerous. You think you're safe now, don't you? He said. You think you can just move on? Start over? With him? My grip on the phone tightened. This has nothing to do with you. It has everything to do with me, he snapped. You don't get to erase me from your life, like I meant nothing. I'm not erasing anything, I said. I'm choosing something different. And you think he'll fix everything? Ethan continued, his voice dripping with bitterness. You think going back to the past will make you happy? I closed my eyes for a second, steadying myself. This isn't about the past, I said. It's about the truth. And what is that? He demanded. I took a breath. That I was never happy with you, I said. Silence. Heavy. Absolute. Then, you'll regret this, he said quietly. Maybe. But for the first time, that possibility didn't scare me. Goodbye, Ethan. I hung up before he could say anything else. For a few seconds, I just sat there, staring at the phone in my hand. My heart was pounding, but not from fear. From something stronger. Resolve. I looked down at the card again. At his name. At the number. And for the first time in decades, I made a decision without hesitation, without fear, without asking what anyone else would think. I picked up the phone. And I called him. He called me. I said. He's angry. More than angry, actually. But it didn't feel the same this time. What do you mean? I wasn't afraid, I said. There was a brief pause, and I could almost picture him processing that. That matters, he said. It does, I agreed. For the first time, I wasn't trying to calm him down or fix things or make it easier. I just told the truth. And I hung up, I said. A quiet chuckle came through the line, not mocking, proud. That sounds like progress. It feels like it, I admitted. But it also feels like everything is changing all at once. It is, he said simply. But that doesn't have to be a bad thing. I leaned my head back, staring at the ceiling. I don't know what I'm doing. You don't have to know everything, he replied. You just have to know what you want right now. That question again. What do I want? It should have been simple. But for most of my life, I had trained myself not to ask it, not to answer it.
But now,
I want to see you again, I said. The words came out clear. Certain.
no hesitación.
I was hoping you'd say that, he said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. When? I asked. How about tomorrow? He replied. No pressure. Just time. I exhaled slowly, feeling something inside me settle into place. Tomorrow sounds good. Good, he said again, softer this time. We stayed on the phone a little longer, not rushing to hang up, letting the conversation drift into smaller things. Where to meet, what time, simple details that somehow felt incredibly important. It wasn't about the logistics. It was about the fact that there was a next time at all. After we said goodbye, I sat there for a long moment, staring at nothing. Tomorrow. Such a simple word. But it carried something I hadn't allowed myself to feel in years. Anticipation. The next day felt unreal from the moment I woke up. I moved through my morning slowly, deliberately, aware of every small detail in a way I hadn't been in a long time. The way the light came through the window, the quiet hum of the city outside. Even the simple act of choosing what to wear felt different, not like a decision based on approval or expectation, but something entirely my own. I caught my reflection in the mirror before leaving and paused. I looked older, of course. Life had left its marks. But there was something else there too. Something lighter. Something that hadn't been there before. When I arrived, he was already waiting. Standing just outside the cafe, hands in his pockets, scanning the street the same way he had the day before. And when he saw me, his expression changed instantly. That same quiet recognition, that same warmth that made everything else fade into the background. You came, he said as I approached. I said I would, I replied. People change their minds, he said. I'm trying not to, I answered. That earned a small smile. We walked inside together, but this time it felt different. Less uncertain, less fragile. The weight of the first meeting had shifted into something steadier, something that felt like it had space to grow. We talked for hours. Not just about the past, though that was part of it. We talked about everything we had missed, our lives, our choices, the things that had shaped us into who we were now. There were moments of regret, yes. Moments where the what if felt almost overwhelming. But there was something else too. Understanding, acceptance, and something that felt dangerously close to hope. I don't want to pretend those years didn't happen, I said at one point. They mattered. They changed me. I wouldn't want you to pretend, he said. That's part of who you are. But I also don't want them to define what happens next, I added. He nodded slowly. Then don't let them. It sounded simple when he said it, but maybe it could be. Later, as we walked outside, the air cooler now, the sun starting to dip lower in the sky, he stopped for a moment and looked at me in a way that made my heart skip. Mia, he said. Yes, I'm not the same person I was back then. I know, I said. And neither are you, he continued. I hope not, I replied softly. But some things, he paused, choosing his words carefully. Some things don't change. I felt my breath catch slightly. No, I said. They don't. We stood there for a moment, the space between us filled with something unspoken but undeniable. Are you sure about this? He asked finally. About us. It wasn't doubt in his voice. It was care. I looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time in my life, I didn't think about what I should say. I thought about what was true. I'm sure I don't want to walk away again, I said. That was enough. He stepped closer, slowly, giving me time to pull back if I needed to. I didn't. When he took my hand, it felt both new and completely familiar at the same time. Not like reclaiming the past, like starting something real. Months later, I would look back at that moment and realize it wasn't just the beginning of a relationship. It was the beginning of my life as someone who finally chose herself. Ethan tried to reach out a few more times after that, but it didn't last. Without control, without influence, without the version of me that had once responded to his pressure, he had nothing to hold on to. His world shrank in ways I couldn't control, and for the first time, I understood that it wasn't my responsibility to fix that. My responsibility was here, in the life I was building, in the choices I was making, in the truth I was finally allowing myself to live. And as I stood there, months later, in a space that felt like mine, with a future that no longer felt like something to fear, I understood something that had taken me decades to learn. The greatest change wasn't finding him again. It was finding myself. And this time, I wasn't going to lose that again.